From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thanks, Ollie. Welcome to Monday's Richie Allen Show. How you doing? Hope you had a good weekend, and more importantly, I hope you've had a good Monday. Thanks for joining me. I love you for it. Thanks for being here every day. Let's do Monday show.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now, Meghan Murphy is a very interesting woman. She's a freelance writer and journalist based in Canada. She's the founder and editor of Feminist Current, and she's going to join me in the second hour of the programme. She's been writing a lot about feminism since 2010. Recently, she put some pretty benign statements on Twitter about feminism and about transgenderism, and asking questions about how can a trans woman be a woman, and fairly harmless stuff like that, but thought-provoking nonetheless. She's been suspended. It's made the national newspapers here in the UK as well as elsewhere. I look forward to speaking with Meghan Murphy in the second hour. And before that, the broadcaster, journalist and author Wayne Madsen joins the programme. So looking forward to speaking with Wayne. Wayne has a brand new book out. In fact, it was released yesterday, and it's called Trump's Bananas Republic. And it's funny. It's funny stuff. It's funny. It's pithy. It's also true, a lot of it. It's a witty take on the Trump presidency by Wayne Madsen, and he's going to join us live this hour in about 20 minutes or thereabouts. All right. Listen, I won't get into the Russia thing. I dropped a line to Ray McGovern, whom long-time listeners will know is a good friend of this programme's, is Ray. Of course, Ray McGovern briefed 5 US presidents, gave them their daily CIA briefing. Very, very, very lovely man is Ray, very intelligent man. And he's an expert on Russia. I dropped him a line and asked him to maybe come on the programme this week to talk about this. It's been alleged, the Russians are not denying it, 3 Ukrainian naval vessels were seized by Russia yesterday. They were just off the coast of Crimea, which was annexed by Russia in 2014. Russia had no choice but to annex Crimea. After Bob Kagan, the neocon, well, his wife Victoria Nuland, Secretary of State for Eurasia, of course, enacted a coup, removed Yanukovych and put a puppet government into Ukraine. So I've got to come down on the side of Russia here without knowing all the facts, right? What I'm telling you is, of course, the UK's media today is not telling you about why Ukraine and Russia, why they are at loggerheads more so than usual in the last 3, 4, 5 years. It's as if it didn't happen, according to the mainstream media. It's an interesting story because there are entities, as we know, there are groups of people that want to escalate conflict with Russia and push us all to the brink of a third world war. There are such people, and we've talked a lot about it on this programme. Not today, just keep an eye on that story. We'll watch it closely this week. Okay, right. Leaving that one there then. Let's talk a little bit about Brexit. Now, 5 minutes and 5 minutes only, and we won't be talking about it for the rest of the programme, you'll be glad to know. But Theresa May briefed or addressed Parliament today and told MPs, in fact, that rejecting the Brexit deal will be risky and lead to division and uncertainty. That's what she told MPs today. This comes, of course, after the 27 other EU leaders approved the terms of the withdrawal agreement between the EU and the UK. The 27 agreed on it yesterday at a summit in Brussels. May has now got to persuade politicians in Parliament to back this deal in a vote which will happen in a couple of weeks' time. But it's not going to happen. Cabinet ministers admit that she's got an uphill struggle. Labour, the Lib Dems, the SNP and the DUP, and even about 90 of her own MPs will vote against it. It is dead. It's going nowhere. The DUP, that's the Democratic Unionist Party in Ulster, in Northern Ireland, has said it will review its own parliamentary agreement with the Conservatives. That agreement, the confidence and supply deal, is basically propping up Theresa May's government. Here are the highlights of Theresa May's address to Parliament today. Here she is herself, old Theresa May, speaking. This is her summing up her position at the end of her speech.
Our duty as a Parliament over these coming weeks is to examine this deal in detail, to debate it respectfully, to listen to our constituents and decide what is in our national interest. There is a choice which this House will have to make. We can back this deal, deliver on the vote of the referendum, and move on to building a brighter future of opportunity and prosperity for all our people. Or this House can choose to reject this deal and go back to square one. Because no one knows what would happen if this deal doesn't pass. It would open the door to more division and more uncertainty, with all the risks that will entail.
What should happen, of course, is that the UK leaves with no deal, which is a great thing. But Parliament has, well, Labour and the rest of the political parties at Westminster, including the Conservatives, it must be said, have put the kibosh on that idea. It's not going to happen, right? That would be terrifying to the unelected fascists and bureaucrats in Europe if the UK left with no deal. So they've managed to convince the country that it is a terrifying prospect. It isn't. Sadly, there won't be no deal. I'll tell you what's going to happen in a minute.
Mr. Speaker, I believe our national interest is clear. The British people want us to get on with a deal that honours the referendum and allows us to come together again as a country whichever way we voted. This is that deal, a deal that delivers for the British people, and I commend this statement to the House.
All this come together bollocks is monumental bollocks. No politician, no captain of industry, no banker, and the elite does not want us to come together. Everything that is done is designed to drive people further and further apart. That was May's bollocks anyway, I'll tell you in a minute. Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, this was his response, or a little bit of it anyway.
The Prime Minister may want to try and sell yesterday's summit as a great success, but to borrow a phrase, the reality is nothing has changed. The Prime Minister says if we reject this deal, it will take us back to square one. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, under this government, we've never got beyond square one. The botched deal is a bad deal for this country. And all yesterday did was mark the end of this government's failed and miserable negotiations. There can be no doubt that this deal would leave us with the worst of all worlds. No say over future rules and no certainty for the future. Even the Prime Minister's own cabinet can't bring themselves to sell this deal.
Yeah. That was Corbyn. What about the leader of the SNPs, Ian Blackford? He took the opportunity to talk about Scottish fishing rights.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's deal means Scotland is to be taken out of the European Union against our will and out of the single market, a market which is around 8 times the size of the UK. Mr. Speaker, Scotland voted to remain. Our rights must be respected. Living will rip away jobs, hit living standards and end freedom of movement, something that will make it harder for our precious NHS to attract and retain the staff that we need. Migration has been good for Scotland. The Prime Minister talks about queue jumpers from Europe, an outrageous slur against EU citizens that come here. But she blatantly disregards the rights that we will all lose to live and work in Europe. Mr. Speaker, we are not prepared to give up these rights. The Prime Minister's deal carries no majority in this House and has split her own benches. It means a blindfold Brexit is now certain. There is no long-term agreement on our trading relationship with Europe. It is a deal full of ifs and buts. Crucially, here we are again, with another sellout to the Scottish fishing industry by a Tory government. Well, been here before. We were sold out by Ted Heath, and we've been sold out repeatedly by Tory governments.
Yeah, well, of course, that was Ian Blackford there, the leader of the SNPs in Westminster. And finally, you'll be glad to know there won't be much Brexit after this, and we probably won't have much of it this week either. Boris Johnson, whom some bookmakers are making a short-priced favourite to succeed May, some, not all bookmakers, in the event that May's days are numbered or nearly numbered. Boris Johnson, former Foreign Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I congratulate my right honourable friend on beginning her campaign to sell this deal to the country with the frank admission just now that it is unsatisfactory. I may say I think that is a bit of an understatement, because it's very hard to see how this deal can provide certainty to business or to anyone else when you have half the cabinet going around reassuring business that the UK is effectively going to remain in the customs union and in the single market, and the Prime Minister herself continuing to say that we are going to take back control of our laws, vary our tariffs, and do, as she said just now, real free trade deals. They can't both be right. Which is it?
Well, rather than play you May's boring, meandering answer, the answer is freedom of movement to the country from the European Union will continue. Look, this is the way I see it. The European Union is in checkmate position. If May was to get this deal passed through Parliament, the European Union would be delighted. If May doesn't get it through Parliament, which it's probably a 500,000 to 1 shot that she does, so let's say she doesn't get it through Parliament, in all likelihood May's time as Prime Minister is over, finished, right? Which would probably mean in the next couple of months there would have to be a general election. Now, I know all about the Fixed Term Parliament Act and all of that, and how Parliament is supposed to sit for 5 years and all of that. I'm well aware of it. But the SNPs have basically declared their intention to withdraw their support for May's government. May going, with all of this Brexit confusion, would probably mean there would be another election, in which case I predict there would be another hung Parliament. Nobody would get a majority. But the Liberal Democrats, Labour and the SNPs, with the help maybe again of the Democratic Unionists in Northern Ireland, who don't like Corbyn traditionally, but I reckon you might have a kind of a rainbow coalition with Jeremy Corbyn at the helm, meaning there would be, because Lord Kerr, who drafted the language for Article 50 when he was based in Europe, was on Adam Bolton today, the Sky News programme which broadcasts in the mid-morning, and Kerr was saying there is a provision in Article 50, in the draft version of Article 50, where they could extend Article 50 in the event of a calamity in politics. So May leaves, there's got to be an internal election in the Tory party, the DUPs have gone, there's no proper majority, Corbyn screams, Labour screams for an election, you have an election. What will happen in that eventuality is there will be a delay to Article 50. Everything will be shelved to pave the way for a kind of a limbo, kind of a further purgatory period, which gives the European Union all the time in the world to basically undo the referendum result of 2 years ago. The country's not leaving the European Union. Not properly. I said this on June 24th, 2016, and I'll say it again until it's all done and dusted. 17 minutes past the hour. We won't talk anymore about Brexit today. Too much, we've talked about it, but it is important. It's important that people understand why it is being attacked, why it is being undermined, and why the vote is being overturned slowly but surely. No matter which way you turn, it's checkmate now for the European Union. This is the Richie Allen Show, live on Fab Radio 2 here in Manchester, richieallen.co.uk. We're on TuneIn Radio, triggerwarning.tv, and if you download the Cogent Radio app, which is a free app to download. Lots of content on there, including this show daily. And it is not one of those predatory apps. Doesn't want any information from you, none of your data or any of that stuff. It's run by my pal Hayden Hewitt. All right. Jane Shilling, interesting surname, I suppose. Jane Shilling has written a very interesting opinion piece in The Telegraph today, and we might talk a little bit about it with Meghan Murphy later on. How on earth does university turn curious, feisty children into such fragile flowers? That's the headline in the opinion piece by Jane Shilling today. I'll read you a little bit of it. She writes, another week, another report of the closing of young minds in the very place, university, where they should be most open. I do remember that, dear listener, in my university days. I do remember it being a place of openness where people could think and say what it is they wanted to think and say, and there would always be somebody there to have an argument with you, to have it out with you. Used to be open places. So she writes, another week, another report of the closing of young minds in university where they should be most open. Guidance for academics at Sheffield on creating a safe and positive learning environment includes ensuring that such controversial and sensitive topics as race, politics, death, bereavement, mental health and gender identity, that's the whole of Shakespeare for starters, writes Jane Shilling, are not included in compulsory modules, or if they are, that alternative topics are offered. This is madness, isn't it? This is what's happening at Sheffield. Sheffield University says to create a safe and positive learning environment, race, politics, death, bereavement, mental health, gender identity are not included in compulsory modules. Let's not discuss those things lest somebody melt down. Newcastle University, writes Jane, joins T.S. Eliot in the conviction that humankind cannot bear very much reality. What has Newcastle University done? It has offered deadline extensions, resits and approved absence from lectures to students who are studying distressing topics. Jesus Christ. I wish I'd have been going to university these days. It would have been a breeze. Offering deadline extensions, resits and approved absence from lectures to students studying distressing topics. So you fail an exam. Well, it's just because I was triggered when I was attending the lectures there. Oh, fair enough. We'll let you sit it again then. Lovely. She writes, does Jane, the best loved children's books are fraught with jeopardy, hardship and grief, from The Lost Children of Grimm's Fairy Tales to Beatrix Potter's intrepid Tom Kitten, Laura Ingalls Wilder's accounts of the rigours of a 19th century American pioneer childhood, the resilience of Harry Potter in the face of extraordinary trials, and the transcendent courage of that classic of the early teenage years, Anne Frank's diary, she writes. She goes on to say, it's a strange route that leads to the swerving of difficult topics in tertiary education. A bold curiosity about the world is a quality that tends to get the heroes and heroines of classic children's narratives into trouble. In these stories, she's saying, it's curiosity and open-mindedness that gets the heroes and the heroines into trouble. But it also distinguishes them from their duller peers. Brilliant point. She finally says, the journey from childhood to adulthood has never been easy, but if universities were to celebrate intellectual curiosity as the key to that transition, our academies would be intellectually and emotionally more vigorous places. Brilliant point. Good stuff. That's in the Telegraph today, Jane Shilling. Shall we move on, dear listener? Am I hearing you? Do you want me to move on? Listen, about being triggered. I spoke in Sunday View yesterday about the Royal College of Nursing recommending that escorts be provided to OAPs in care homes if they wanted to, masturbation devices, that OAPs should be allowed to walk around naked in designated places if they are naturists, and if they wanted to practice sadomasochism, they should be able to do that as well. So to put it on YouTube, I chose an image of an old man and two women in a bath, one of the women wearing a blue dress. Some of you didn't like that and bombarded me with emails claiming even it was offensive. Now, you should know there's a two-word answer to that. To those of you who found it offensive, fuck off. Back in a minute. Billy Idol on the Richie Allen Show. It's exactly 25 minutes past the hour. Dancing with myself. Lots and lots of tweets coming in. Keep them coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. My first guest is a top man. Love having him on the programme because he's always brilliantly briefed, meticulously prepared. He's an expert in international relations and geopolitics, and he's been writing about it and appearing on television and radio all over the world for over 3 decades. He's also written over 15 books, and we're going to talk about his most recent book, which was only published this week. In fact, it was released yesterday. It's called Trump's Bananas Republic. I read the introduction. I've ordered my copy of it. It's hilariously funny. Delighted to welcome to the programme Wayne Madsen. Wayne, it's funny, but it's important. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, good to be with you.
Hey, thanks for coming on. I'll be tweeting out to our listeners where they can find information as to where they can purchase the book, because we have to support the independent media, particularly when they're producing excellent stuff like this. It's really good, Wayne. Wayne, I'm going to take you to task straight away. As bad as Trump is, how could he be worse than George W. Bush?
Well, there are several reasons why he's worse. I always found the worst part of George W. Bush to be the neoconservatives, the neocons that he gave high positions in government to, and probably one of the worst. I mean, we know there was Dick Cheney and there was Donald Rumsfeld, but one of the worst was John Bolton, who was so controversial. The Senate never confirmed him, so we saw Bush do something similar to what Trump has just done with the vacancy at the Attorney General's position with this guy Matt Whitaker. He made Trump made a recess appointment. So Bolton was U.S. ambassador, unconfirmed by the Senate, for almost a year and a half. And now where is John Bolton? He's now Trump's national security advisor. So, Bush was bad. I still believe Bush is a war criminal. But in the case of Trump, we have somebody who is every bit as neocon as Bush, but is also quite problematic on his own, in his own right. You talk
in the introduction about, you can understand why people got excited about him during the campaign. You and I, of course, spoke at length during the campaign a couple of years ago. You, to be fair to you and to your credit, you weren't buying much of what was being put out there by Trump, but you understand why people got excited when he said no more wars of intervention, no more, trying to solve the problems of the world. We're not going to do all of that. All this stuff sounded great, Wayne, didn't it?
It sounded great at the time, because if you look at who he was running against, both his opponents in the Republican primary and also Hillary Clinton, he was sort of breaking in this tradition of U.S. military intervention to perform nation building, overthrow governments like Gaddafi in Libya, Assad in Syria, but he didn't stick with that. And it was pretty clear right from the get-go that, especially under the influence of people like Sheldon Adelson and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, he was prepared to first throw under the bus the Palestinians. And they were the first, but not the last. We've seen it also occur with several other countries around the world, and opposition movements. And so it's no real surprise that he's supporting the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia in his defense of torturing, dismembering. Maybe that happened at the same time. This columnist and longtime well-known person in Middle East reporting, Jamal Khashoggi. Now, I recall his uncle, Adnan Khashoggi, who was a key player in the Iran Contra scandal. So I kind of wonder, with Jamal Khashoggi having all this knowledge about the inner workings in the Middle East, whether a certain George W. Bush also kind of had a wink and a nod when he heard about Jamal Khashoggi's death, because certainly Jamal Khashoggi was in a position to know an awful lot about the Bush family's involvement in the Iran-Contra scandal.
That is some crazy story, the Khashoggi story, Wayne, isn't it? I spoke recently with Sibel Edmonds, who's based in Turkey these days with Newsbud, and she put together a very interesting report. She's been doing it for a couple of months now, and I like Sibel because she's fairly open-minded, but she thinks that there might be some evidence that Khashoggi might have been part of some plot to bring an Arab Spring to Saudi Arabia. That, of course, doesn't forgive or excuse what looks like happened to him, that horrible death that he had. But it's a very, very murky situation, that, with a lot of things that don't add up and inconsistencies here and there, isn't it? It's a weird story, that.
Yeah, I think the thing about Saudi Arabia is that Jamal Khashoggi was working, obviously, with some of the Saudi princes who never liked Mohammed bin Salman rising up, thanks to his father, the dementia-ridden king, Salman. And of course, MBS, as he's called, had earlier rounded up a lot of Saudi princes and put them in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh, and was actually torturing some of them until they agreed to let him have, some of their money that they had stashed in foreign accounts. So, you can see why, in the Middle East, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And you can see why Khashoggi, who was a green card holder, permanent resident of the United States, but whose kids are U.S. citizens, lived in suburban Washington and Northern Virginia, wrote a column for the Post. People in the Middle East remember him as the editor of Al Hayat, the Paris-based Arabic language newspaper, which covers the Middle East, Saudi-owned, but was always used as a very good reference point for people who wanted to know what was really going on behind the scenes. So he's been a big player in Middle East politics for a long time, but obviously he was done away with because MBS probably was aware of some of the people that Khashoggi was talking to in the opposition. Years ago, right after 9/11, and I don't know why anybody wants to support the Saudi regime, 15 of the 19 hijackers, if we believe they were involved, and they had some role to play. Whether it was what was advertised is another story, but 15 of the 19 so-called hijackers were Saudi nationals. And but I remember after that talking to the head of not the Saudi Arabian Democratic Opposition, he said the Arabian Democratic Opposition, who was based in London. And he told me, how would you like to have your country named Bush America? And I kind of joked. I said, we may be coming to that. But they wanted a Democratic Republic of Arabia without the Sauds. If that was the goal of any sort of Arab Spring, I think that's a good goal. But there was a Saudi Spring, but it really never amounted to much. And it started amongst the Shia population in the eastern province, and the Saudis brutally massacred them, and then helped Bahrain, which is connected by a bridge to the Saudi mainland. They helped them massacre many members of their majority
That's
Shia
right.
population. So, this gets into, the U.S. siding with the Arabs against Iran. I've been to the United Arab Emirates, which is a pretty open country, but it's an ally of Saudi Arabia. I've also been to Iran, and I can say, as far as openness, and I found the Iranian people to be much more open and sincere than the people on the other side of the Gulf.
These are interesting times. We're going to take it back to Trump. Wayne Madsen is our guest. If you haven't read Wayne, go to waynemadsenreport.com. Wayne's a prolific author. He's got a terrific new book out, brand new, called Trump's Banana Republic. If you go to waynemadsenreport.com, there is a link to where you can get the book. I came across it on Lulu, that's LULU.com. There, as I said, very funny, hilarious, but right on analysis of the Donald Trump presidency. You describe him brilliantly in the introduction, who he is, you know, the shortcomings that he has as a person. And I've often wondered about him, Wayne, how much does Trump really know about what's going on, and how much is Trump just delighted to be the president? Because we're talking about an egomaniac.
Yeah.
And if he's just there to be delighted about being president and to mess around on Twitter, who's really calling the shots? And does that show, or does that lead to evidence that shows that Trump is a plant, that he's a puppet, that he was deliberately chosen because of his characteristics, because he would divide people in the way that he has divided people, so that we would be distracted and then certain things could happen while we're all watching his tweets and looking at his lewd behaviour? What do you think?
Well, I think he's a plant by multi-billionaires who support the so-called libertarian viewpoint. The Koch brothers, for example, Sheldon Adelson, who used to be a Democrat, but he's so pro-Likud party and Netanyahu, he supports Trump because of the Middle East policy more than anything else. But he also agrees with Trump in another area. Remember, Trump started out in the casino business in Atlantic City. It was all mobbed up. He was working with people like Nicky Scarfo Jr., who, interestingly enough, died of a heart attack, serving a life imprisonment like a week before Trump was inaugurated. But he was dealing with the mob, and he also opposed Indian casino gambling when it first started. He said the Indians are trying to put me out of business in Atlantic City. Well, what put Trump out of business in Atlantic City was his own mismanagement. He's a terrible manager. The Trump organization is more like a mafia syndicate than a company. They have, it's not publicly traded stock, so there's no outside board of directors. The directors are all Trump's family members or cronies. There's no independent audit committee on his board of directors. So he's been running this Trump organization like the mafia dons ran their syndicates. And in some cases, the Trump organization was working hand in glove with those syndicates in the construction business in Manhattan, but also the casinos in Atlantic City.
Why is that relevant, Wayne? Let me just jump in there. This is really important. Wayne, by the way, goes into this in the new book, and it's a must-read, folks, particularly if you're a Trump fan and you're dogmatic. Have a look, have a listen to another viewpoint. Wayne Madsen has got no personal gripe with Trump. He's a proper journalist. If you're a Trump devotee, you've got to read this, Trump's Bananas Republic. You've got to look into it. Why is it relevant? I mean, this is brilliant stuff. His organisation was run in a way that scrutiny from the outside was very difficult. That's a brilliant point. Why is that relevant, and why were his ties... I mean, because I can only imagine that no matter who was going to build stuff in Vegas, you were going to have to deal with some unscrupulous people. And maybe Trump supporters might say, that's a bit unfair, Wayne. The mafia were involved in Vegas for years. Why do you think it's so relevant?
Well, it points to his attitude towards the Department of Justice and the FBI today, because the way we hear him talk about witch hunts is the same way many of these mafia dons and capos spoke of the FBI and the Justice Department when they were under investigation for everything from murder to running the rackets, the numbers rackets and things like that. So we see this sort of mafia-like mindset. Trump talking about there no collusion. He's not under there. Collusion is not a crime. Criminal conspiracy is the crime. The RICO Act, Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, was passed to go after the mafia families. That's why it was originally enacted. And Trump knows, after seeing so many of his old business colleagues from the mob go to prison, he knows that RICO Act can be used against him. So he never talks about criminal conspiracy. He always talks about collusion. Collusion with who? Well, the Russian thing is too easy. I think, to be more exact, it's collusion with criminal elements, whether they're exiled Russian or Ukrainian oligarchs or like-minded people, including people associated with the drug cartels in Colombia. Who else was buying his condos at the Trump Ocean Club Tower in Panama City, Panama, which eventually that got to be such a scandal for the honest people that lived there. They had the name Trump pulled off the side of the building, and yes, we've seen that happen with other properties around the world. Trump sold his brand to make his money. It was the Trump name. He really never did anything other than have business associates brand his name on buildings or whatever. And now we see an aversion to the Trump name, and the Trump organization. I think last year it's estimated they lost tens of millions of dollars because the Trump name is no longer valued. And people who have dealt with Trump says, look, that Trump brand was always just cheap gold-plated garbage anyway. People that have stayed at his hotels say that, it's the furniture in the hotel room. It's, what Trump would buy to just have a hotel, but nothing opulent.
As you're saying that, something is coming to my mind about the hotels. I watched a celebrity roast of Trump recently on YouTube, and I hadn't seen it. And Lisa Lampanelli, who's a hilarious but very rude but very funny woman, she said to Trump when she was roasting him, "You put up more worthless hotels than a mentally handicapped child playing Monopoly." And it's a very crude and a very rude line. But I got to thinking, in your book, Wayne, are you describing this background of Trump's? Is this the leverage, this potentially criminal behavior that could see Trump exposed to a RICO predicate if somebody wanted to expose him to that? Is it leverage? Has Trump basically been leveraged? Has he been put in that seat by Sheldon Adelson and the people you talked about, the Koch brothers, with the help of Cambridge Analytica and Steve Bannon and all that? Has he been put in there and told, right, you're going to do what you're told, enjoy being the president because of all this stuff in your past that you've been speaking so brilliantly about there? Is that it?
Yeah. Of course he's told what to do. He likes these crowds, including people who are paid to be at these rallies. I'm sure that some of his rallies, he's going to be in Mississippi today, campaigning for this really awful placeholder Republican woman. He just, so what the people who control Trump always want to make sure he's got adoring crowds. Yeah. The people, people on Fox News say nice things about him. And that's why he's so averse to the White House press corps now, because they started asking what he considered to be impertinent questions. He is definitely controlled. He's always been controlled by others. Look, he's never really made any money on his own. He's always had to be bailed out by those like Russian oligarchs, mobsters.
Zionist bankers. Let's be honest, Zionist bankers as well.
Deutsche Bank being one of the big creditors. And so, he's a very plastic, obvious, synthetic type individual who is easily manipulated. That's what we have. And you mentioned Cambridge Analytica. The thing that's very worrisome about that company and its follow-ons, because they're still in business under different names, is that they were originally hired by the Ben Carson and then the Ted Cruz campaigns. And Steve Bannon came out of the Ted Cruz campaign and convinced Jared Kushner, look, we need to use these guys. But this international group of election manipulators, they are active in Britain. And I would note that Steve Bannon has just been in the UK.
That's right.
Pushing this idea. He wants an international fascist movement. He just gained a huge victory with this guy being elected in Brazil, this far right guy, Bolsonaro, who has openly praised Hitler. And Bolton's going to be meeting him in Rio, and then he's going to be in Buenos Aires for the G20 conference, and he'll be meeting Trump. Now, the idea of a fascist international should be very worrisome to a lot of people.
Why is that happening, Wayne? There have been learned men and women on this program, like yourself, and they think that this is some sort of agenda to divide people, and if more than we've ever been divided, and that the rise of the far right in Europe, in Hungary, and places like that, on the face of it, people might be happy and think, oh, it's great, these are anti-establishment parties. But of course, they're not, Wayne, are they? They're not really. No. They say a lot of populist stuff, but when it comes down to it, I don't believe that the Italian government, this Liga 5-star coalition, is really going to take on the fascists in Brussels. They won't do. It's just a nonsense. No. Is that what we're seeing with all of these right-wing movements all around the world? Steve Bannon. It's just to divide us, make us hate one another even more than we do normally.
Yeah, I think most of these movements are looking for television coverage. The violent street demonstrations and things like that. But I think the worrying part of it is that maybe some of the leadership, certainly like Marine Le Pen and Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, are media sort of personages who, and it would be interesting to find out who funds their parties. But the worrisome thing is, like with the rise of the Nazis in Germany in the 1930s, is when people who are not part of they're not the puppets being controlled by influential multi-billionaires. If they gain control, Hitler wasn't the first choice of the bankers in Germany to lead that party. There were other people, but Hitler got the following, and the rest, as they say, is history.
It's brilliant, Wayne. Your analysis there, and it was through listening to people like you over the years that my eyes opened up to this. It's incredible. We see people more divided than they've ever been, more partisan than ever, more sure that they are right and everybody else is wrong than ever. And as you describe in your book, Wayne's book, by the way, folks, Trump Bananas Republic, brand new, out since yesterday, can be ordered now. Go to WayneMadsenReport.com or Lulu.com. Terrific book. While we're all joining sides, identity politics, a handful of billionaires, Wayne, they gain and gain and gain all the time. And that's what we're seeing through this Trump presidency. Is that a good thing, that it's kind of expedited under Trump, meaning that more people might become aware of it?
Well, I would hope so. And, just to follow on to the rise of the Nazis in the 30s, there was an attempt to block that by what was known as the Popular Front or the Broad Front in France. Socialists, Social Democrats, some Christian Democrats, Center Party, Communists all got together and tried to prevent it. But you're right about if the anti ultra-right forces don't start cooperating, we could see the same thing happen. The problem in Europe in the 30s was the Popular Front had too many arguments amongst themselves, and they weren't able to really present a united front. So the Popular Front of France was the last government before Vichy, French Marshal Pétain's people took over. And unless you get a broad coalition against the Cambridge Analytica types who manipulate elections, I'm afraid we could see the same thing happen again. I'm actually planning to visit the UK maybe in a few weeks to promote this book and just also follow in the footsteps of Steve Bannon. See, I know people who served in the Navy with Bannon. He and they, we're not talking about neo-Nazis. I know people whose fathers were part of this, Ost-Europa of the Nazis coming out of the Baltics and Ukraine. And that's who we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the sons and grandsons of these people. These aren't neos. These are paleo. And I really need people to wake up to what's going on. So I may be visiting London and Brussels because I know that's where Bannon's been, and I know how this guy operates. I know a lot about his background. This guy he may look like a hobo, and he does. But his thoughts and his policies are poison, and he's still providing consultation to Donald Trump. They had an official falling out, but for example, it was Bannon who was Trump's liaison to this new Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro, who wants to throw all of his political opponents in prison. Now, where did Trump get the idea to throw Hillary Clinton and James Comey in prison? I would suggest that there's a lot of international back and forth amongst these types of political parties than meets the eye.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though Clinton is the devil incarnate, I don't see Trump doing that anytime soon. And of course, his relationship with the Clintons going back decades is very interesting as well, isn't it? These are, you look at Bannon, one of the things they're very successful at doing, these people, and I've spoken to people on this program and in public, in the streets, people who've got a right-wing point of view and whose politics would be on the right. And I'm happy to speak to anybody, as you are, and listen to their point of view and then discuss what my point of view is, and let's have a chat about it. And I always say to people on the right when I meet them, don't think that these guys are really in it for you. The likes of Steve Bannon and all these guys. These are master manipulators. They're not in it for you. I'll tell you how manipulative these guys are. Neil Sanders, who is an expert on mind control and a brilliant author, like yourself, Wayne. Neil has done a lot of work on Bannon and Cambridge Analytica. These guys are so sophisticated. They're behind these guys. A lot of the banning of right-wing people on social media. This is how sick this stuff is. They're behind it. They're behind their own bannings because it makes them look like martyrs and it riles people up. I mean, you won't be surprised by this. These are old tactics, So I say to people, especially people on the so-called progressive left, and I don't like the progressive left no more than I like the far right, but I say to them, stop banning these people. It's what they want. They want to close down discussion. Let's not close it down. Let's open it up like we used to open it up years ago. Back to you, Wayne.
Well, something to keep in mind about Steve Bannon is when he got out of the Navy as a Lieutenant JG in the early 80s, he somehow had enough money to get an MBA from Harvard. And then he went to work for Goldman Sachs. Yeah. So, you put that together. Now he wants everyone to think he's like, out there fighting for all these ultra-right causes in the streets with those in the National Rally in France and the English Defence League in England. And hey, you're dealing with an ex-banker for Goldman Sachs. So he looks like a hobo. He looks like a bum. Is that just part of, his act? And I would suggest it is part of his act. I don't think he's a very clean person anyway. You could tell that from some of the White House events where he was. He looked like he was recovering from a hangover and slept in his clothes. Actually, that was one of the reasons Trump apparently didn't want him around. He said he called him Sloppy Steve. Was his nickname, and that's probably the one time I would agree with Trump in one of his pejorative nicknames that he assigned to someone.
And you think Sloppy Steve, and you think there's probably back channels still in operation between Trump and Bannon. Well, if Trump is the puppet that I believe he is, I suppose there probably are back channels open between them.
Oh, there definitely are. Some of the Kiss and Tell books we've seen recently have strongly suggested that Bannon and Trump still speak on the telephone. And of course, that's Trump's own private phone. So those calls are, of course, available to every probably 85 different foreign intelligence agencies now active in the Washington area, trying to make heads or tails of the Trump administration.
These are strange times. Your book is, I think it's essential reading for people. You know, people who say that they're open-minded. If you're a Trump, as I said, devotee or fan, Trump's Bananas Republic by Wayne Madsen. Check it out at waynemadsenreport.com. He talks about how Trump has attempted to transform the US into an oligarchical banana republic. Wayne, final word to you before we run out of time. What's going to happen with this guy in 2 years' time? Do you think those that benefited most from putting him into power in the first place, do you think they want another 4 years of him after that? Or will they have done enough damage with him, and will it be time then to appease liberals or, you know, people on the left with a left wing president? What's your prediction? What's going to happen?
I think some powers, financial powers, will get behind a centrist Democrat who will not be in favor of a lot of the things some of the potential candidates say they're for. But I think with the Democrats having the House, it's going to be political death by 1,000 cuts. We're going to see many, many investigations that the Democrats tried to get underway as a normal oversight function in the last 2 years, but were blocked constantly by the Republican committee chairman. I think we're going to see a lot of these. And I think that and the Mueller probe, if and when that report is released, we're going to see what I see with Trump, that he's basically been running a cronyism type, almost like a criminal syndicate with his business pals and his family. And I think, we'll see a centrist Democrat put up, hey, it won't be Joe Biden, it won't be Hillary Clinton. People that think it is, it's going to be somebody from probably a white man from a Midwest state, Senator Sherrod Brown, who was just reelected, even though the Republicans took all the other statewide offices. Somebody like him may be the candidate with some progressive credentials, but not totally.
It's going to be interesting, Wayne. Wayne's book, again, Trump's Bananas Republic, lulu.com, waynemadsenreport.com. Congratulations on the book, Wayne. If you do make it to London and then you happen to venture up to the northwest to Manchester, I'll certainly be happy to buy you a pint. You've come on this programme.
Well, sounds good.
Often enough.
I was in Manchester twice, and I'd certainly like to get back there again as well.
Well, Wayne, I'd be delighted to meet you. Finally, haven't spoken to you so many times over the years, and buy you a nice pint of real ale, Wayne, in one of our great ale houses up here.
Sounds wonderful.
Thanks for your time today, and congratulations again on the book. The brilliant Wayne Madsen, Trump's Bananas Republic, available now. Go to waynemadsenreport.com or go to lulu.com, LULU.com. I've just begun to read it, read the introduction today. It's funny stuff. It's also very pithy, it's very poignant, and it's very, very, very well briefed. It's right on, this book. Check it out, particularly if you happen to be a Donald Trump supporter. Have an open mind. Thanks again to Wayne Madsen. Right, it's a minute and a half to the top of the hour. That's triggered the old Donald supporters, no doubt. I do have a few of them. I think I have more than a few who listen to the programme. And you know, I'm not even going to repeat what it is I believe, my philosophy. They're all criminals. Don't come back at me with the what about Hillary. Listen, I wrote the book in terms of broadcasting about the crimes of the Clinton family. I can't think of another programme that has spent more time on these gangsters and who they are. So don't throw that old chestnut at me. They're all gangsters. They're all crooks. They all know one another. They all do business with one another. And ultimately, they are all puppets of a much greater power than them. And that's what people, I think, anyway, need to understand. It's what they need to understand. Right, we've got some AC/DC lined up. Why not? Bit of AC/DC, eh? There's no rhyme or reason to the music selections on this programme. I'm going to read some tweets when I come back. It's your Richie Allen Show for Monday, November 26th, 2018. Tomorrow is 4 weeks to Christmas. There you go. Tomorrow is 4 weeks to Christmas. There you are. If that's your thing. AC/DC, You Shook Me All Night Long. Back with more on your Richie Allen Show in exactly 3 minutes' time. AC/DC, You Shook Me All Night Long on the Richie Allen Show, 3 minutes past 6 for Monday. Welcome if you're just joining the programme. Good to be with you. Daryl likes the music. How you doing, Daryl? Music. I've never been happy saying music. Hi to Natalie as well. I had to check the date there. Yeah, 4 weeks to Christmas Day tomorrow. Christmas Day falling on a Tuesday this year. I don't know whether that works. I don't know how that works out for me. I normally finish on... Well, you know, I work Sunday to Thursday. You know this. I don't know how it works out for my bit of time off. But, yeah, it's an interesting time for me. It was a sad and difficult time when I was younger, Christmas. So I never really enjoyed it as a child. Personal circumstances and all of that, no problem. But it wasn't a great time for me. These days, it's a more enjoyable time because I spend it these days with somebody that I love. And we just kind of batten down the hatches and spend time with one another and chill out. But we don't get caught up in the commercial side of it. We don't. I mean, we pop out and we see the city and we go out to a couple of places, have a couple of drinks and chill out. But largely, we don't get all bogged down by the madness of consumerism and running around spending silly money on things that you don't really need and all of that. That humbug. But yeah, it's a better time these days than it used to be. And of course, I'm not going to... Let me read a few tweets, because if I don't, I'll run out of time. I was musing. Bob Tweet said, damn good tune, AC/DC. While kids in my class were into Kylie and that bollocks, I was rocking out the DC. What's wrong with Kylie? And Jason Donovan, Stock Aitken and Waterman, God be with the days. Rick Astley, the T-Boy. Was that true, that story about Rick Astley never going to give you up? Is that true? Were these guys crapping hits? They were crapping hits. They would pull their trousers down and they would evacuate a hit, Stock Aitken and Waterman. And I understand Astley was an office boy and was making tea. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard this story. And these guys, it was almost like a Trading Places moment. Do you remember that film? And they said, let's see, can we get this guy to sing? Rick Astley. And then Never Gonna Give You Up is one of the biggest pop hits in UK music history. Huge hit. Anyway, I meander. Patricia tweets, how you doing, Patricia? Anyone who has been paying even a little bit of attention knows that the Trump family is made up of self-serving crooks. They are using the presidency and the White House as their own personal bank account. I think Patricia is right. And I think, again, it goes to prove, or it goes to demonstrate, Donald Trump is not in charge of what goes on in the United States of America or outside it. He is a puppet, a front man. Check out that video I made on YouTube about the film Casino and Donald Trump. It's interesting. It goes into some of that and what might be going on. He's a front man. Distract the masses with the lunacy of the tweeting, with the unheard of behaviour, calling out news people. And of course they lap it up and they love it. He's truly a man of the people. He's calling CNN fake news. Donald is the man, because CNN is fake news. Yes, you dumb bastard. But then he's doing an interview with his good friend Sean Hannity on Fox News, which is even faker news than CNN. Well, it's not even faker news. They're all the same. What is it with people? They haven't got the humility to say, all right, you got me there. You got me. Yeah, I thought he was great, Donald, because he was calling out CNN. And then I saw him sitting down, batting away softball questions from Sean Hannity. You've got me there, all right, yeah. That's a phrase that's disappearing from the lexicon. the Western lexicon. Oh yeah, you were right actually. As we dive deeper into the whirlpool of narcissism, we haven't the cojones anymore to say, do you know what, I was wrong. I like saying when it is that I've been wrong, because I'm wrong so often. I have many opportunities to say, yeah, I got that wrong actually, yeah. What's wrong with people? You know, this guy they think is their hero. All this MAGA bollocks. What bollocks that is, MAGA. And QAnon. How could they believe that, you know? Because they've watched too much television, dear boy. That is true. That is true. Television has clouded their brain and fogged over their minds. They really believe this guy is the secret agent, Donald Trump. He's there in the Oval Office, and he's going to reveal and dismantle the deep state. They actually believe it. I wouldn't mind if 100 people believed it, or 5,000, but millions of people in the United States believe this crap, and even more believe it in the UK. They believe it. In this country as well, Donald's the man. Yeah, he's not though, sadly. He's not though. Right, Meghan Murphy is hopefully standing by. We are connected, I think. She's a feminist, a blogger, a broadcaster, very interesting woman. It turns out she's been permanently banned from Twitter for commenting on issues around transgender rights. We've talked a lot about those things, you and I, on this programme, so we'll get into that with Meghan in a couple of minutes' time. Keep your tweets coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. You know by now how to engage with other people. You know that. You simply go to twitter.com. Where it says search Twitter, all you've got to do is put Richie Allen Show, all one word, in. And when you do that, you'll see what other people are tweeting me. Shall we welcome our next guest to the programme? Let's welcome her to the programme. I came across my next guest because many of you were tweeting about her to me. I had heard of her before, and I think she was on a list of people that we wanted to contact to invite onto this programme. She's a writer, journalist and broadcaster, and to her credit, her blog and her website won the Best Feminism Blog Award in the Canadian Blog Awards a couple of years ago. She's very, very well known and has appeared on TV and radio all over Canada and the US and the world. And she founded and edits Feminist Current. She's been writing about feminism for about 8-9 years now. Recently, she was tweeting about transgenderism, and I mean, this is a huge thing. We've gotten into this a lot in the last couple of years, and it's one of those things, it's very reactionary, isn't it? It gets a reaction from people. I have a lot of sympathy with what my next guest has been saying and the questions she has been asking. Let's just welcome her to the programme. Live on the line from British Columbia. Welcome to the show, Meghan Murphy. Meghan, you're very welcome. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on the show.
Great to have you on. You've got to be one of us, Meghan. I'm an Irish boy. With a name like Murphy, you've got to be one of us, right? You are one of us.
I've got the look, I've got the hair, I've got the name.
I wasn't going to bring up the hair. Yeah, you've got a fine head. As my grandmother would say, a fine head of Irish hair. You do. Indeed. Listen, welcome to the show, right? These are serious times. When an organisation like Twitter or Facebook, when you consider the kind of hegemony those organisations have in terms of their control over what people see and what they read, it's not funny when they start permanently banning people because of things they say. Talk us through it. What happened? What did you tweet and how did it end up with you being banned?
So I never really had any issues with Twitter until really recently. Like, I mean, really, it only started in the past maybe week and a half. I had been locked out of my account once before back in August, and then no other problems. And then this past week and a half, I was getting locked out almost every day. I would wake up and my account would be locked again and again and again and again for tweeting things like men aren't women, males can't become female, for criticizing actually one specific local trans activist here in Vancouver who's been responsible for going after women's organizations, for trying to defund a local transition house, for getting the ads pulled on my website, Feminist Current. And obviously now he's trying to, or he was trying to get my Twitter account shut down. It has been shut down now. The final straw I apparently on Friday night, this was a nice Friday night for me. I was at the bar and realized I was banned from Twitter. I was having a good night until then. But it was because Twitter has implemented this new misgendering rule in their terms of service. So you're no longer allowed to refer to men who identify as women as he. And I had tweeted about a man who had been calling up estheticians in Vancouver here, asking for a Brazilian bikini wax. And these women were declining to give him a Brazilian bikini wax, telling him they only did the service for females. And he took 16 women to human rights court to try to sue them for money. And based on this claim that they had discriminated against him because he was a so-called trans woman.
Did he win? Did he win, Meghan?
He dropped the case, and he dropped the case because some information came out that he had been leaving comments online that were pedophilic in nature, and he didn't want it to get out to the media.
Wow.
And so I tweeted about this. All I said in my tweet was, yeah, it's him, and posted a screenshot that showed his real name, posting a review saying at one of these beauty salons, I guess, who had actually gone and given him some kind of waxing service. So he had posted a review on Yelp saying, so-and-so did a great job on my wax. And it was his real name. So I posted the screenshot and said, yeah, it's him. And that was what got me banned from Twitter under this misgendering rule, because I referred to this man whose name is Jonathan and who still goes by Jonathan on Twitter, but apparently has decided that he also wants to sometimes go as Jessica because this is convenient for his new narrative. So I guess I broke that rule. I didn't even know that was a rule. This is a brand new rule in Twitter's terms of service. So they didn't actually let anyone know. The media only found out that this was a rule on Friday. So they went back into tweets. This was a tweet that was about 2 weeks old. So they had been combing through all my tweets to find anything they possibly could to ban me, and they found this.
This is not funny. It's not right. These are dangerous times. I really do believe that. Meghan Murphy is our guest. Go to feministcurrent.com, bookmark Meghan's site if you haven't been on there before. Banned from Twitter on Friday for allegedly misgendering a man who sounds like, the guy, skeletons in his closet. He's well able to give it, but not take it back when it comes his way. These are new rules, you think, Meghan. Who is influencing those who make these decisions at Twitter? Where is it coming from? I ask this because live in Manchester in the northwest of England. We've got one of Europe's most well-known gay, lesbian, transgender hangouts. That's Canal Street in Manchester. Sometimes meet with gay and lesbian women, sometimes with transgender folks, and they don't support any of this nonsense. They don't understand it, where it's coming from. This is the $64 million question. Who's putting pressure on Twitter to carry out this absolutely outrageous decision to delete your account?
It's a few. I mean, yeah, like you say, I wouldn't think that most people who actually, are transgender, who actually suffer from some kind of gender dysphoria or whatever, I wouldn't think most people would support this kind of thing. I think it's really just a few people with a lot of power. There's a few trans activists and trans identified people who work in Twitter safety and who are connected to these trans activists who have gone after me and who have also gone after other women. And unfortunately, I criticized these people. And I mean, I've been criticizing transgender ideology and gender identity ideology and legislation for some time now because I think it's incoherent and dangerous in terms of women's rights. But they didn't like what I was saying, and they were connected to some people at Twitter Safety and got me taken down, and that's it. I really think it's just a few people. I don't think this is a widely supported practice. I don't think that most people in the world would support banning somebody because they're asking critical questions or uncomfortable questions or challenging ideas. Or simply I also just want to have a conversation. You know, it's so hard to just even talk about this issue because it's so controversial. And when you do start talking about it, you start getting threats and you start getting no platform. People get fired. You know, I've had petitions against me. People have no platform me. I get violent threats all the time on Twitter, and Twitter does absolutely nothing about it. And, you know, if that was a blanket rule, you know, I'm used to getting attacked online. It doesn't upset me anymore, honestly. It's kind of the way things go on the internet, and you kind of just deal with it if you're a public figure. It doesn't make me personally upset. I either just ignore it or I respond. But the fact that Twitter has never, ever, ever done anything to deal with the literal violent threats, you know, people telling me to choke and die and drink bleach and that I should be raped and et cetera, and on and on and on and on and so forth. Twitter's never done anything about any of those tweets, any of those accounts. And yet I identify a male as a male and they ban me from Twitter permanently. I mean, this is so crazy and so hypocritical to me.
It's untenable, isn't it, to imagine a situation where the violent threats and the names that could be used against people, that could be ignored, and yet you talk about a man being a man, even if he wears a dress and decides to identify as a woman, and he can get banned. Remind our listeners, let me just remind before I ask you this, Meghan. Meghan Murphy is our guest. I know many of you will know of Meghan. feministcurrent.com to find out more about her. Feminist Current is on Twitter as well, at Feminist Current, for the time being, I suppose, is on Twitter, at Feminist Current. I don't say that for a laugh either. Why are so many, I've had women on the programme talking about this before, why are women worried about the rise in the last 2 to 3 years from this tiny minority, this demand for rights, for sharing spaces, for being in, you know, all women shortlists? Why do women see it as being dangerous? Why is it dangerous? Look, I know the answer to this, but not that I know much. I don't know much, or I don't know everything, but I've been reading about this a lot. For those who don't know, explain to our listeners why women are concerned about it.
Well, I mean, I mean, if men are allowed to identify as women just on a whim, you know, without any processes in place, without having to, you know, get surgery, be on hormones, have a doctor's note, et cetera, just by filling out a form. All you have to do is fill out a form online. This is like the new legislation that's being passed in various countries wherein you just can self-identify as female, and you don't have to change anything about your life or lifestyle. You know, there's no criteria. And then you're legally female, which means that you're allowed to enter into women and girls change rooms. There's been cases of men being transferred to female prisons. Yeah. And then, you know, there was a man named Karen White in the UK who had been charged with rape a number of times and decided he wanted to identify as a woman, was transferred to a female prison and assaulted 4 women as soon as he got there. Things like that. Men are allowed access into women's transition houses, and these are places where women go to escape male violence and who have been, you know, severely traumatized by men, and, you know, want to be in a space where they can heal away from males. Yeah. You know, not all spaces need to be separate, of course, but there's certain spaces where women are particularly vulnerable. Change rooms, washrooms, transition houses, things like that. And I mean, it's so dangerous and it's so unfair. And beyond that, it's just kind of crazy making, this insistence that, you can be a woman looking at a man with a penis and that man can insist, no, I'm not a man, I'm actually a woman, and you have to accept me as female. It seems insane. I mean, it's hard to even talk about it. It sounds so ridiculous.
Well, it's hard to believe we are talking about it. When I read the Karen White story, I thought I was reading a transcript of a Monty Python sketch, and I don't say that for a laugh. I really did. I didn't think it was genuine when I read it. I thought it was a joke. I thought, no, this can't be right. And of course, within a couple of minutes, a quick, a cursory search, I was able to bring back another dozen stories from broadsheet newspapers talking about it. And I thought, this is absolutely outrageous. And the question begs to be asked then, why are our governments and our, the health ministries of our countries, why are they falling over backwards to accommodate what I would consider to be the lunacy of some of these requests, changing the language? Don't say pregnant women, you've got to say pregnant person. Again, that evokes a Monty Python sketch from The Life of Brian. Stan, you can't have babies because you're not a woman. Why would you want to legislate for that sort of craziness? I don't get it. What's really going on here, do you think, Meghan?
I think people are afraid. I mean, so the trans activism, the trans movement has been really, really, really successful in convincing people that their struggle is akin to gay rights, for example. And they use this language of inclusivity and acceptance and have successfully labeled anyone who doesn't go along with this narrative that, trans women are women and trans men are men, and that in order to be, like a liberal, open-minded, progressive, accepting person, you have to accept that it's possible to be born in the wrong body, and that if a person claims to be the opposite sex, then you must go along with that. And they've labeled anybody who disagrees or asks questions as bigoted and regressive and in many cases akin to Nazis. And I think people are really scared to challenge it and to go against it because there are really serious consequences, as we're seeing. People are being silenced and people are being ostracized. I know people who've been fired from their jobs because they've asked questions about this. And it blows my mind how much power this group has and how much they've accomplished in such a short period of time. I can't think of any other so-called civil rights movement that's had this much success in such a short period of time. Women had to fight for over a century to get the vote.
This has only been a couple of years. And you've obviously been following. Meghan Murphy is our guest, folks. Going to mention Meghan again, feministcurrent.com. Meghan was banned from Twitter last weekend, this weekend just gone, for an innocuous comment, a point of view shared by at least most of my social group. And a lot of the people I hang around with, they're far more, I suppose, liberal than I am. I don't like to pigeonhole myself, but they are, and they agree. A man can believe what he wants to believe and he can wear what he wants to wear, and that's freedom, and people should, let him alone. But not when what we're seeing with the demand to be allowed into women-only spaces, with the demand, to go to female prisons. One of the things that's really interesting about this, and it's scary as well, is is education, Meghan. And you'll, of course, have been watching closely, not just what's happening in Canada and in North America, but what's happening here in the UK as well. We had a situation very recently. I think, in fact, it was on Sunday's, in Sunday's press, there was a story about a woman who found out that the school her daughter is going to, her 13-year-old daughter, the school has given the daughter a male name and has accepted that the daughter, the girl, is transgender, is a trans man, I suppose, or a trans male, and that she will need to be transitioning. They've organised counselling, and a lot of this stuff, this information, wasn't shared with the mother. There's talk about this stuff being discussed with primary school students. Again, a lot of people in this country are saying primary school students really shouldn't be thinking about sexuality or their sexual orientation. They should be allowed to develop into whatever it is they develop into. But now we've even had crazy things like drag queen story time in schools here. Again, Meghan, I thought that was a wind-up, as we say here in the UK. I thought it was a joke. I didn't believe it until I found that it was happening at lots of primary schools and kindergartens in the UK. Are you following this? Because it seems to be accelerated here in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening very quickly in Canada also. I agree, it seems accelerated in the UK, but yeah, it's happening here also. And the issue with trans kids is really concerning because, and I think a lot of parents are really scared and concerned about this issue, partly for reasons like you bring up now, that now it seems like it's part of school policy that it's okay to keep this kind of thing secret from parents. So a kid can transition at school and the school has no obligation to inform the parents. But also because when kids are starting to identify as transgender, what the trans movement is pushing for is for those kids to be allowed to go on hormones, puberty blockers, which inevitably leads into surgery. And these are really serious surgeries. They're really, it's to fully transition, you have to go through tons and tons of surgeries over your lifetime. They're really kind of harsh, awful surgeries, to be honest. I don't want to get into details, but it's pretty gross. And there's been no long-term studies on how these hormones are impacting people, but it cannot possibly be good for kids to be stopping their growth in this way, and to be, it's essentially sterilizing kids. And I don't think that kids should be making these really serious decisions that are going to impact their entire lives to the point that they're not going to be able to reproduce when they become adults. Their bodies are changed forever. There's studies that show that these hormones can impact all sorts of things, including bone density, and who even knows what else. But it's not something that we should just be accepting without asking really critical questions. It's not something that we should be pushing for. It's something that we should be thinking critically about. But when anybody does think critically about it or challenge it or ask questions, they're no platform, they're banned, they're blocked, they're smeared, they're called all sorts of names. And, essentially the trans activist movement will do anything to silence them. And it's really quite frightening in a number of ways, not just in terms of free speech, but like I said, in terms of the impact on kids and teenagers and parents and everybody.
Absolutely. These platforms like Twitter and Facebook, they've grown exponentially and have pretty much become the only game in town. And I remember reporting many years ago when Google acquired YouTube, when back in my commercial radio days, I remember reporting on that and seeing that as a dreadful decision to allow that merger go ahead, and how anti-competitive it would be, that Google would own the biggest video sharing platform in the world. How dangerous is that? And do we need to look at legislating in terms of, does society, Meghan, need to tell organisations like Twitter that they can't operate in the way they have begun to operate, shutting people down because of their status now, because of their hegemony, for want of a better word, that they can't just decide what is right and what is wrong? They can't sanitize the world. This is right, this is wrong. Meghan Murphy has said something that is wrong because we say it's wrong, therefore she's banned. Does that have to be addressed, that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Twitter can pretend all it likes to just be a private company making decisions about its users, but Twitter is, a huge platform, and Twitter is understood by the public to be a place where we can have free debate, where we share news, where we get information, where we have conversations with other people, where we engage. And when they start shutting down free speech, when they start shutting down people who say things that they don't like for whatever political reasons, this is political. This is not, there's nothing that I ever said on Twitter that could possibly be qualified as hate speech. I have never, ever, ever tried to, suggested violence against anyone. I have never, I'm not engaging in personal attacks on people. I'm just stating facts and asking questions and trying to have conversations and, stating really basic facts. Again, men can't become women, things like that. And because there's, certain players over at Twitter who support this trans ideology and have the power to shut people down, I mean, this is going to silence more than just me. I think it's appalling that I'm a journalist and a writer and that I've been banned from Twitter for reporting facts on their medium. That should scare people that we're not allowed as journalists and writers to speak the truth in public. But also, there's been numerous accounts that have been suspended and locked and shut down. People have been emailing me about it, and I was aware of it before I was banned also, that this was happening, for saying things similar to what I said, for saying things like men can't become women, for challenging gender identity legislation, for talking about this man that I mentioned earlier, Jonathan. Anyone who's mentioned his name on Twitter has been suspended or locked down or banned. He obviously has some kind of pull at Twitter. We should not be letting a few people have this much power over our speech and this much power over what we're allowed to talk about. And for better or for worse, Twitter is the place where these conversations happen.
Yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist, Meghan. I'm a conspiracy theorist in my middle age. I think those platforms were always meant to do that. I think they were. I think we were hoodwinked. I think Facebook and Twitter and these platforms were meant to grow in the way that they have grown, so that, so that discourse and the free flow of information could be not only monitored but could be controlled. It's positively Orwellian, I believe, and I know people will say, "I'll put your tinfoil hat away," but I do see that. I've been a journalist for years. I've worked in commercial radio and national radio for years. I had a YouTube channel that in February had nearly had 100,000 subscribers. We were getting nearly the best part of 900,000 views a week. And because I interviewed somebody that was supposedly persona non grata, the channel was deleted. It didn't matter that I, as a journalist, was vehemently arguing with the interviewee and disputing the points that he was making. Didn't matter. The channel was just obliterated. And it doesn't bother me. I don't care whether I have a YouTube channel with a lot of subscribers or not. But that's where we're going, that. And it's terribly wrong. There must be room in the world for people to disagree with one another on all sorts of issues and just talk about it without people being shut down and banned. It's how I feel. I don't believe anything should be... I don't believe there's any no-go areas. I really am a genuine free speech enthusiast. I don't care. Holocaust deniers, much as I disagree with them, I don't care. It should all be out in the open, I believe, Meghan, where we can debate it and challenge it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think anybody should be able to say whatever they want. Honestly, yeah. I know that's not the progressive position, but it's like, let people talk. Let people say what they want.
It is progressive, by the way. You are progressive. Sorry to interrupt you. That is progressive. This was said to me the other day by a guest. What you just said is progressive. Let people feel comfortable enough to say whatever it is they say, even if you think it's repugnant. Well, fair enough. Thanks for telling me. At least I know what you think. Now I'll have an argument with you. I think your point there is exceptionally progressive. Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's fine. I think so too, but it seems like the left has taken the opposite position, which is that some speech is okay and some speech isn't. And essentially, it's the idea is that these people who are representing the left now, I'm a leftist, so I can't say everyone on the left, but it seems that the left is being represented in this way. They decide what is right and what is wrong, and the ideas that they agree with are okay and can be spoken, and the ideas that they disagree with cannot be spoken. And I think it's appalling that your YouTube channel was shut down. And I think that is really a big deal and really scary. And for me, I'm an independent writer and journalist. This is my voice is dependent on social media. It's dependent on things like Twitter. I'm starting a YouTube channel this week. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it'll be immediately shut down. But, you know, I do depend on these platforms to get my work out there and to engage with people. You know, I don't have a job. I don't work for a company. The reason that I've been able to write and speak about all these controversial issues, to say what I really think, and most people can't say what they really think. Most people don't feel they're able to talk about this stuff, and I have been able to talk about this stuff, and it's because I built my own platform. It's because I have my own website. It's completely dependent on donations. We don't have advertisers anymore. We aren't funded by anybody else. We're not funded by, you know, big companies, corporations. Nobody owns us. And, you know, without access to social media, I'm not able to get my work out there. I'm not able to speak in public. It is a really big blow. And of course, the people who are after me know this, and they're literally trying to shut me down and shut down my voice and stop me from working and stop me from writing and speaking about things that they don't want me to speak about. And it should be really scary.
It is for everybody, and people have to support you. People have to support people like you. I mean, we've supported people on this program. You know, I've spoken out for people that I find ridiculous. You know, people on the very far right who say terrible things that have been demonetized through PayPal or banned on Twitter. You've got to stand up for them. You know, I have a lot of sympathy with the points that you make. I've been reading your website today. I'm very interested in it. So I'd have a lot in common with you. So it's easy enough for me to support you. I want to ask you a little bit about Me Too, just for 5 minutes before we run out of time. Before we do that, though, is it permanent, or is there some door open whereby you can appeal this to Twitter and appeal to their better nature?
As far as I know, it is permanent, and I did appeal it, and I got, you know, a form response back saying that I had engaged in hateful conduct, so my account had been shut down permanently. There is a petition that people can sign, and I hope people will sign it, to Twitter to reinstate my account at change.org. And, you know, I am going to continue to fight it, and I hope other people will continue to fight it and to contact Twitter if they know people at Twitter to demand that my account is reinstated, because they've just, I mean, it seems clear that very recently they've really started cracking down on this. And so all sorts of people are going to continue to be getting banned. Not just me, but it's going to keep happening. And this is going to, me being shut down is going to scare other people into silence also.
Of course it will. Absolutely right. That's the thing, and maybe that's what it's designed to do. Meghan Murphy is our guest. We've got Meghan for another 5 or 6 minutes there. If you've not come across Meghan before, check out feministcurrent.com. Really thought-provoking stuff. Meghan is a writer. She's been a broadcaster, very successful blog. We're speaking this evening because her Twitter account was basically banned or deleted last Friday because of a fairly harmless conversation she was having with somebody where she was expressing her opinion that she's entitled to do about whether men who claim to be women are indeed men or not. I want to ask you this before we go, and I'm not going to try and virtue signal. I hate the term. I don't like it, and I've never been a virtue signaler anyway. I'm somebody who speaks his mind and sometimes gets into trouble. I've been around the media for a long time, as I said, commercial and national media, and I've seen it at every level. And I know that over the years, women were put in positions they should never have been put in. I know that. I absolutely know it. I've worked in organisations where women were subjected to sexual harassment and felt that they had to behave in a certain way, or it might mean not advancing, or it might mean that things could become problematic for them. I would never deny that. It would be foolish. Harvey Weinstein, I don't know. If Weinstein has done the things that he is alleged to have done, I think there's a lot of smoke there, and I think, you know, a lot of the things that have been said about them, they appear to be genuine. This guy was obviously some sort of monster, some sort of predator, and all of that. Is there a danger that when we talk about Me Too and we talk about women's rights in the workplace, and again, only a moron wouldn't support equal rights for women and men in any job, in any situation, is there a danger, though, that we might start to get in the way of affecting the kind of natural dynamic between men and women, outside of all the stuff that we talked about, which is not nice? Is there a danger that there could be some kind of permanent change in the way that men and women interact that might in fact be negative, as we talk a lot about Me Too and the issues around it? Feel free to murder me now if you want, Meghan, but that's my question. That's my question. Go ahead.
I mean, what I think about Me Too is that I think that Harvey Weinstein sounds like a real monster. Yeah. And I think that a lot of good has come from Me Too. I'm glad that women feel they're able to speak out about this stuff. I do think that there's a problem when people are not differentiating between rape and more benign but perhaps bad behavior on men's part. I don't think that it's necessary to pretend that everything is the same. I think that it's possible to say that a man behaved badly or even in a misogynist way, but isn't akin to a rapist. So that would be one of my critiques about Me Too, is that I think we're lumping a lot of behavior in together. And I think that there's a difference between violence, sexual assault and rape, and a man behaving in an inconsiderate way on a date. I think that it may be all connected. I think that a lot of men do feel entitled to sex. I think that a lot of men do feel entitled to access women's bodies. I think that a lot of men do not behave in respectful ways towards women when it comes to sex and relationships. But I also, at the same time, don't necessarily think that any and every accusation needs to be treated as a crime. I don't think that all men need to be immediately fired and ostracized because somebody made an accusation. I think that we should be kind of having broader conversations about this, and I'm interested to know, where we go from here, and what will happen if all we're doing is firing people and vilifying people instead of trying to have more open conversations. And that's not necessarily a popular thing to say, I don't think.
No, it won't be. But I like it. I like you saying that. I mean, I've worked over the years in environments that were almost 50-50 in terms of male and female employees. And, there were things that happened when I was coming into radio in the mid to late 90s, Meghan. When I say things that happened, there was behaviour between men and women that would have been fine then. And I think, God love me, I can be called old-fashioned now. I think still fine, open, kind of touchy-feely, joking around, that today might be weaponized and might be turned against people, and might be used to, relieve somebody of their job or put them under pressure. You can hammer me if you want, and you can demand examples from me, and I'll give them to you. But today we hear stuff about companies where there's a lot of young men and women, and all sorts of rules and regulations are being laid down. You're not allowed to put your hand on the shoulder of one of your female, co-workers. You certainly can't ask her for a cup of coffee, or you can't ask her on a date. All this sort of stuff. I just worry about that, to be honest. I'm not saying I want a world where I can do whatever I want and say whatever. I'm not saying that at all. I just worry that the really bad stuff that's happening, the sexual harassment, which is sexually harassing a woman at work, asking her out, she turns you down, you become passive aggressive, that's terrible. You make life difficult for her, that's outrageous. I don't think any boss should ever ask an employee out on a date. Employees amongst themselves, it went on for years. My old man worked at a factory that employed 3,000 people, Meghan. Half of them married one another, and ended up married with children and happy lives. I do worry about it. I do worry that it will have some impact on the natural interaction and behaviour between men and women. But I'm wide open to be called old-fashioned and behind the times. I can take it, But it's an interesting area. What you said won't be popular. There's no doubt about that amongst some women. But I think there's a far cry from the things that Harvey Weinstein was doing and others to, I don't know, some of the harmless or less harmful stuff that I was exposed to when I was working back in the 90s. But anyway, I'll give you the final word on that. It was brilliant having you on, by the way. It's an outrage that your account has been deleted. It's an absolute outrage. People should support you. They should go to feministcurrent.com. Support people like Meghan who've been banned. You know, in an ideal world, we would all stop using the bloody platform and leave it in solidarity with those who are being banned. Maybe I'll send Jonathan a tweet even tomorrow. I might just do that and see do I get banned. I'm not too bothered about it. Meghan, final word for you on what we just talked about, the dynamic between men, women in the workplace. Final word to you. And again, sincere thanks for your time today.
I think we do need to pay attention to the power differential. You know, you mentioned bosses asking out employees. You know, there's a real important power dynamic there, and women will feel like they're kind of stuck. Women often feel like they can't say no, even when they're talking to men who are their so-called equals. Women are socialized to be polite and not to make people feel uncomfortable and to kind of go along with that kind of thing. And so I do think that we need to pay attention to power when we're having these conversations. At the same time, I am interested in conversations. I'm interested in public conversations. I'm interested in people trying to understand one another. And that's something that I've sort of changed my mind about probably recently over the past year. I think I probably would have taken a harder line on this issue, to be really honest, 5 years ago or something like that. I'm older than I was then. I know a lot of men. I have a lot of male friends. I've had lots of boyfriends. And I've had conversations about this with all sorts of men. And I feel like we as a society should be having these conversations in a more open way. I would hope that would be productive. I don't know for sure, but I, in general, think that conversation is productive, open, honest conversation. And I guess sometimes I worry that we're creating a culture where no one's allowed to be honest, and where we aren't allowed to be honest with one another, and we're not allowed to screw up and make mistakes and recover and apologize because we're so scared that the mistake is going to lead to us being fired or ostracized or no platformed or whatever it is. We are seeing this happening in a variety of ways. You say the wrong thing and you get banned from Twitter. I want everyone to feel like they can talk and to be honest and to ask questions.
It's going to sound patronising. It isn't, and it's not meant to sound patronising. It's about as mature a statement as I've heard on this programme in a long time. People should absolutely have I always say it, Meghan, people should have the right to be wrong. I'm wrong 1,000 times a week. People should have the right to be wrong, and then to listen to other people and listen to their points of view, and then weigh them up against your own, and then make a move to the left or to the right or whatever. Conversation. Self-censorship is a terrible thing, and what we've been discussing earlier on only leads to self-censorship. It serves no good to anybody. It's been fascinating having you on today. Thanks for coming on. Had obviously heard about you in the past and read about you. You were on a list of people I was going to invite onto this programme. I'm delighted that I did. Sorry that your account was deleted. It's an outrage. It shouldn't have happened. And I hope that, maybe it doesn't look likely that it will happen. It'll be reinstated. But I hope that people will support you. Let us know when you have your YouTube channel up and running, and we'll tweet it out all over the place and encourage people to watch your videos there. Feministcurrent.com is the website, and we've been speaking this hour to Meghan Murphy. Meghan, thanks for your time. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me on and for covering this issue. I really appreciate it.
It was an honour. Look after yourself. Hopefully we'll do it again in the future. That was Meghan Murphy speaking to us live from British Columbia. Very serious issue that. As I said, check out feministcurrent.com to find out more about Meghan there. 9 minutes to the top of the hour. Tweets were coming in during that. I think I was covering the questions that you wanted to or the comments that you wanted me to make, or the questions you wanted me to put to Meghan. It's an interesting one, this list of this code of conduct that we see these days, for people going into the workplace. I talked about Waterford Crystal, massive company, one time in Waterford employed over 3,000 even. Let me grab some water. I'm drying up there. Hang on. Yeah. At one time employed probably close to 3,500 people. Amazing place to work. I was a tour guide there in the early 90s during my summer holidays. And many of the employees there married one another. And, you know, they would have went to a lot of social things together. You know, dates would have been requested and accepted, and courting would have happened, and they would have, they would have married. Look, if you ask a woman, or if a woman asks a man out, and you work with one another, I think if you want to ask somebody out that you work with, I think you should be able to do that. However, there's a however there. There's a but there. If the person says, listen, thanks, but no, I'm not interested, you better take that and accept it and not become all passive-aggressive and moody and hostile towards the person who spurned your advances. Be a man about it, or be a woman about it, and accept it and get on with it. Oh, well, I tried. I can honestly say, actually, this is the gospel truth now. Gospel truth. What are we coming up for? 7 minutes to the top of the hour. I never had the guts to ask anybody out that I worked with. There were girls I worked with over the years that I liked, obviously, that I liked a lot, that I was really comfortable in their company, and, you know, I might have fancied, but I never had the courage to do it. Maybe partly because I thought, if I am knocked back, as it were, it's not going to be an easy place to be. Maybe that's what put me off. But I don't think people and their natural ability and their natural inclinations should be inhibited by, you know, a lot of what we're hearing in the media these days. I don't think, you know, I don't think a guy or a girl should be reprimanded, sanctioned by their employer because they have expressed, you know, a romantic interest in a co-worker. Like I said, if it's rejected, they should deal with it. If it's not rejected, happy days, you know. I don't think a boss should ever ask an employee out, ever, never. Shouldn't happen. Shouldn't happen. It's a gross, I would say. It's definitely irresponsible and taking advantage of the position you hold in the company. If it's your company, or if you are the boss of someone else's company, you shouldn't be asking somebody out. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't. If the advances come the other way, maybe, but you shouldn't do that. That is definitely putting somebody in a bad position, as Meghan said there. These are interesting things. They're very interesting. Human behaviour, the dynamic of the relationship between men and women, what's happening to it, you know, through campaigns like Me Too and other campaigns. These are things we should be discussing. At least I think so anyway. That's kind of it for the programme, by the way. Really interesting show tonight. Big thanks to Wayne Madsen for coming on. Wayne's book is Trump's Bananas Republic. That's Trump's Bananas Republic. A humorous look, but also a factual look at the time period leading up to Trump's election, his inauguration, the 2 years since, and how he got to be there, but also looking back at Trump, the businessman, going way back to the 80s. Wayne Madsen, really interesting stuff. WayneMadsenReport.com is where you'll find a link to the book, or Lulu.com. And I really enjoyed listening to Meghan Murphy there. Banned from Twitter last Friday. Check out our website. It's feministcurrent.com. Feministcurrent.com. Really enjoyed what she had to say there in the last 10 minutes, particularly that point about being hardline 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, but then, you know, taking maybe a softer approach as you get a little bit more experienced, as you get a little bit wiser, as you get older. I really like that. You know, I know less now than I did when I was 18. It's not my... it's something I read somebody else said many years ago, but it's incredibly apt. It is for me anyway. I know less now than I did when I was 18, and maybe when I'm 70, if I live to be 70, I might say I know less now than I did when I was 43. That's it for the programme. Thanks for listening this Monday. It will be, of course, repeating real soon on richieallen.co.uk. It'll be on Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, all the usual places as well. And, of course, it'll be on YouTube a little bit later on today. It's 3.5 minutes to the top of the hour, so I'm going to love you and leave you with a bit of Coldplay. We're going to close out today with Coldplay. All right. See you tomorrow then. Bye for now. Bye now.